Oh, hi there. Come, take a seat. We're gonna learn today. Oh, my back. Ooh, ooh. Very exciting video today. We're gonna be doing a step-by-step guide of digital painting in Procreate. So I know for a lot of the art babies out there, when you start drawing, you put down a sketch, you don't really know the steps to take after that to actually finish that sketch. And you just kind of end up with 500 unfinished pieces in your backlog and you just never really get to them. Well, after today's video, you're not gonna have that anymore. I hope not. As an artist, the first thing that you have to do is have a plan. Ask yourself a few questions. What is my subject? Where is my subject gonna be on this canvas? What's my composition? How is my subject gonna be posed? And last but not least, what is the lighting scenario for this painting? And when you come up with the answers for these questions, that's all the planning that you need. You never go into battle without a plan. Do you think Po defeated Tai Lung without a plan? I don't think so. Did he? That might not be a good example. Now, just before we start, I do want to introduce the sponsor that's making this video possible. PUBG Mobile. PUBG actually invited me to create an art piece for their PDP design contest, which is short for P-topia Design Project. The project is actually really cool. It allows gamers and artists to basically design the world of PUBG Mobile. And the PDP project has different seasons that are open to you guys for you to actually submit your artwork. Your work will actually have a chance to be incorporated into the game, and you'll also have a chance to win a lot of cool prizes such as cash, in-game skins, and a lot more. So if you guys are interested, feel free to join along with me. But in this video, we're going to be actually working on a submission that I'm going to make to this event. So one of the elements that we're going to be working with today is this skin right here, and this was actually developed by players as part of the PDP challenge. If you guys feel inspired by the work that I make today, you can click the link in the description below to see how you can join the contest, and of course you can go and download the game and try out this gnarly skin for yourself. And I want to thank PUBG Mobile for making this tutorial lesson possible for you guys. So with all that being said, the first thing we had to do is we come up with a plan. I have 3 characters that I want to include in this piece that we're going to do today. She's our first character. She's got a cool design, simple, black tank top, cool hat, sunglasses. That's great. That means I don't have to draw the eyes. Here's the second character that we're going to be drawing today. Very iconic look. You've probably seen him before. No eyes. This is fantastic. So I'm going to have to figure out a pose and a composition for these 2 characters, which is what we're going to be doing in our sketching phase. And last but not least, we're going to be adding the mummy into this composition. Mummy? I mean, look at these glyphs on the, that's sick. I want to make this almost like a poster design. And as for the composition, maybe we can go for something that's like a triangular design and we can have the mummy at the back. One of the most common mistakes that I see with art babies is they just go straight in and start drawing small details like the eye, the nose. They start adding everything in, which means you're going to be adding inconsequential details too early on. Like you get really focused, you start thinking about the tiny details, and then you zoom out and it's like, oh. So remember, always start big, lay down your construction lines, determine the poses for your characters, figure out where they're going to stand, how they're going to be placed in the composition, and then I'll fast forward a bit to when I have a solid sketch to show you guys. Boom! Through the magic of editing away our pain and suffering, here's our sketch. Now, me personally, when I'm working, you're going to see that my sketches are really, really rough. I mean, if we zoom in here, you can see some of these construction lines here are not fully erased away, and a lot of these lines are actually not fully connected, so there's like a lot of this stuff going on. And I'll be honest with you guys, my brain is always just so it's very hard for me to make a super clean and refined sketch. This is more of a triangular composition. Illuminati. These 3 right here make up the main focal points of this composition, and I intentionally created this kind of pyramid looking shape. Now if you observe like movie posters and game posters and stuff, you're going to see a lot of this kind of triangular composition going on. It's a good way to lead your eyes into your subject and also keep your eyes moving throughout the painting. You got to know how to manipulate people. Manipulate their eyes. So that's 3 steps of our plan down. 1, we figured out what we're drawing. 2, we figured out the poses for the characters that we're drawing. And 3, we figured out the composition that we're going to place these characters in. So those are the most important parts of your sketch before we do any type of rendering. And for those of you who are new to digital art, rendering just means painting and coloring. Before any of that though, we have to figure out the lighting scenario. I find that one of the problems that causes a lot of people to just end up being stuck on a painting is that they start coloring, they start rendering without knowing exactly where the light source is. So in the case of my painting, my poster design here, I'm going to try to make a lighting scenario inspired by this reference here. We're going to be taking the lighting here because that's a cool combo, the blue and the orange, complementary colors. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a big brush, okay? I'm going to do a quick sketch. In a lot of cases, you know, doing something like this would be called a thumbnail sketch. And the reason it's called a thumbnail sketch is it's supposed to be a really, really small drawing that just gives you an idea of how the final painting is going to look. It's a tool that actually helps you go into the final painting not entirely blind. So you can see I'm actually zoomed very far out right now because I don't want to worry about the details. I'm trying to just see if the colors are going to work. So that looks pretty good. Now for the front two characters, I'm thinking, what if we do like a spotlight at the front? So this is going to be the light section and that's going to be the shadow. So this is going to be the light section and the rest is going to be in shadow. Beautiful, vibrant colors here. Maybe we can add more glow to the bottom, strengthen the silhouette a bit. How about that? Ooh, that's pretty good. You guys see these wispy elements that's on the mummy here? I'm thinking, what if we use that to our advantage to guide the eyes towards the center of our composition, towards our triangular composition? What if we do a little bit of stranding here in the background? With this effect, it kind of brings your eyes into the center. Again, this is something that we got to think about as artists. Every brushstroke that you make is like you're building a road for their eyes to travel on. All right, so I'm actually very excited about how this is going to turn out. I'm going to take this dark blue color, start a new layer. I always start painting from the background first, and I'll tell you guys why. Even though you're only seeing this rectangular section of that backdrop, you got to remember that it actually continues all the way around. So everything that's happening in that backdrop is going to determine the way the lighting looks on your character. Everything is connected. It's like a circle of life. This is perfect. I'm doing a commissioned piece and teaching the art babies all at the same time. Two birds with one stone. Okay, now for the mummy character in the background, I'm gonna add a new layer, start a new layer here, just in case I make a mistake and I wanna go back. If you take your character and you just start painting them on the same layer as your backdrop, after you're like 100 strokes in and you're like, man, I don't like this, then you can't take it back. It's very, very difficult, right? So start a new layer just in case you make a humongous mistake. All the brushes you're going to find me using are available as default Procreate brushes. Okay, so for example here, this one is just the round brush, but I do want to take this chance just to say that there is no such thing as a magic brush. There's no brush that's going to instantly make your work better. All right, love the way that looks. That really draws your eyes into the composition. Now I want to add a little bit more detail onto the mummy itself. So here's a cool trick for you guys. We're going to start a new layer, click this plus sign, and then we're going to click on this layer, click clipping mask. This means that this layer on top will not go outside of the boundaries of this layer right here, which is layer 4. I'm going to take a darker color here and paint the wrappings onto the mummy. You can see this is not going outside of the outlines of layer 4. Nothing crazy, but it just really makes life a lot easier. It makes me want to quit art a little bit less. And that's good. And now because our layers are starting to pile up, and I don't want to be that person with like a huge list of layers to scroll through, so we're going to just take the mummy, 1, 2, 3. We're gonna just group it. I'm gonna collapse this group. You can see now very organized. So once you're happy with the overall backdrop here, you can then start moving forward in your composition. Think of it like a bunch of layers. You start at the very back, you add one layer on top, another on top, another on top, until eventually you get all the way to the foreground. Now I want to show you guys another technique that I like to use to draw my character. So we're going to select this icon right here. This is called the lasso tool. I'm going to set a point right down here, bring it up, follow the silhouette of my character, come back around and close my silhouette. Boom and boom. Oh my god, he's thick. They're both thick. Oh, now once this is filled in, you've got a couple of options. Okay, you can either start painting on this exactly as is, or there is actually a different way you can go about this. So let's say I'm gonna fill this in with a normal, more neutral base color. And I've seen a lot of artists use this technique and it's very popular because it does save you a lot of time. So just fill in the base color for your character. Okay, this is kind of like the colors that you would see if your character was not affected by any lighting. All right, so see, that looks very good, even though it looks very out of place right now. But just follow along with me here and I'll show you guys how you can deal with this after. Now I'm going to finish this off so fast, okay, you won't even realize what I've just done. So I'm going to start a new layer, set it to multiply, then clipping mask. I'm just going to take a basic brush, basic round brush here, and I'm going to set a medium grayish color. And then all you got to do is just boom. Now your characters are in shadow. You guys see how simple that is? Like, you still preserve the colors that are underneath, but it just looks like you've put a layer of shadow over your character. Here's the thing though, I don't want them to be in complete darkness. We do want a spotlight element on our characters, something like that. Check out how easy this is gonna be. We're gonna take our eraser, erase away the multiply. Boom, there's your lighting. You're not happy with the saturation of that light? Now add a new layer, set it to, I don't know, overlay, clipping mask. Find yourself a nice bright orange color, get your brush big, And boom, there's your golden hour lighting. You can of course play around with it, see what fits the aesthetic that you're looking for, right? Could it be lighten, screen, color dodge? Do it the way you want to do it. Yeah, don't listen to me. Now I'm gonna take these two layers, make my life easier, just merge them down, merge this down, and then I'm gonna paint on top of this. Throughout this entire painting process, one thing that I want you to keep in mind is always work from big to small. Now in my experience, what seems to work best for me is to kind of just identify the big main elements first and then work down into smaller details. One thing that I find helps me out a lot when it comes to rendering light and shadow, especially for complex things like clothing right here, is to focus more on the shapes. Don't focus so much on the blending and the soft fading, just focus on the shapes. If you can get the big shapes down, you can definitely get the idea across. Now this is the benefit of having a plan. If I just came in here without a plan, started doing all my tiny rendering, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to keep an eye on the bigger picture here. But as long as you have a plan, you know your light source, you're going to work from big to small, you're going to be able to do a decent rendering. Now we're going to move on to our lady character here. So for things like rendering the skin, usually if it's not a super close-up portrait for your character, I try not to do too much detail on here. When it comes to drawing, sometimes less is really more. You don't have to draw every single detail, and hopefully we can achieve some of that simplification with this painting here. You see, when you're applying shadows, you really don't need to do anything too crazy. Just figure out where these shapes are supposed to be. You don't even have to blend it out. It works. You don't have to. One thing that I find really important when it comes to drawing characters is always knowing where your shadows are going to fall. And in general, you want to be very deliberate about how you're doing that. There are lots of tutorials on that out here on YouTube, and I've also just done a tutorial on that on Patreon for the month of August. So if you guys are interested, you can check that out as well. We're going to give her some sunglasses. If you guys have trouble drawing eyes, this is a good art hack. Just give them sunglasses. I'm just kidding, please don't do that. If I catch you running from your responsibilities, I will come find you and I will end you. And that's it for the first chunk of our rendering stage. Big to small from the back towards the front, layer by layer. And the smaller your brush strokes become, the more detail you're starting to add into your characters. Now is the time for us to actually start zooming in and adding in smaller details, adding in some refinements. So there's not going to be any more blocking in huge chunks of colors. Now at this stage, we're just focused on adding in smaller details. So that's the before. That's the after. You can see the rendering right there. For the detail phase, I always like to start that on a brand new layer. It's just to make sure that if you do mess it up, you can have something to fall back on. This is where we get to zoom in, add in details such as the chin strap here, polishing up some of the shapes that you see. One thing that I think is very, very important to remember for this stage is that it's not about perfection. For the art babies in the back, remember, there's no such thing as perfection in art. Usually, I like to just keep myself moving throughout the entire painting, keep your energy up, right? Keep going from place to place. Don't stay in one spot for too long. Don't get caught up on the same thing for too long. If something doesn't look perfect to you, it might not even be noticeable to other people. As artists, we are our worst critics. Now, as you're watching this process, you might be wondering, how do I know when to pick which colors and how to apply those colors? Well, a lot of this is going to come down to the lighting scenario that you choose. You have to kind of refer back to that. Make sure that you have a good reference so that you can at least have something to base your lighting scenario off of. And choosing colors, stuff like this is going to be very difficult, especially if you're just starting out, but just be patient with yourself. This is going to get a lot easier with a lot more practice. Just make sure that you learn and take your time to understand your color theory and how lighting works. Many of these things just come down to basically repetition. You have to repeat the same process over and over again and really just get used to it. Build up that muscle memory. One thing that I actually forgot to do here is flip my canvas around. You definitely want to flip your canvas around every once in a while just to pick up on some of the mistakes that you might have made. So I had to make some minor adjustments here with the liquify tool. I love the liquify tool. So I'm not going to go too crazy with the detail in this video because I'm sure you guys know how to do that yourselves. What I want to do now is actually show you guys some ways that you can really make your drawing pop. And I usually like to save this step for last. Okay, so here we have the foreground group with our characters. There's kind of like a midground here with this crate, and just behind that we have the mummy. Now I'm going to start a new layer just in front of the mummy layer and behind everything else. For this layer, we're going to try a hard light. Now take this beautiful bright turquoise color, use an airbrush, and look at that. Now all of a sudden the character's glowing. But you also want to make sure not to overdo it. So if you do feel like it's bleeding a little bit too much, you can take an eraser and chip back into it. This is the most beautiful mummy I've ever seen. Mummy? Let's do another hard light layer. You can take something with a little bit more texture and really add some of your own personal flair to it. That's giving Spider-Verse. For me personally, I like to save this step for last, just as a kind of final touch up to my paintings, but I do know there are other artists who like to use this throughout their entire drawing. Do what works for you, don't listen to me. I'm just an old man on the internet. I'm gonna take this chance here to add some of these glowing hieroglyphs that you see on the character. This is what I mean by it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I'm literally just scribbling. If you guys look at my paintings, literally all the writings that you see on signage, on walls, it's all just a bunch of gibberish. And it works, you know, as long as you get the shape down, it works. To add a bit of like sparks kind of coming off the tendrils of our character, just to give it some more flair. I'm gonna add one more hard light layer just above the characters in the foreground, and now we're gonna add even more saturation using a bright orange color. So just like that. Now it looks like the characters are almost glowing from the light hitting them. You can change the opacity of this layer by clicking on that icon and shifting this bar up and down. And a very final touch that I like to do in some of my drawings is I set a multiply layer, I select a neutral grayish color, and what I do is I take an airbrush and just darken the outer perimeter of the piece. Essentially what I'm trying to achieve with this is guiding your eyes towards the center of the composition by making the edges darker. It's like a vignette. Now I'm gonna go back into this piece, do a little bit more of a final rendering, and then show you guys the final result. So there is the final result. Hope you guys enjoyed the explanation of this process, and hopefully you guys like the piece that I made based on this art challenge. Once again, I wanna thank PUBG Mobile for making this tutorial possible. Check out the links down in the description below. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty happy with this piece. If you guys wanna see more art content just like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel. With that being said, I'll see you guys on the next video. There's this thing called complementary colors. So basically colors on the opposite ends of the big old color wheel. So blue is here, orange is here. But when you put them together, think like golden sunlight on your face with a blue sky in the background. Isn't that just, it's so aesthetically pleasing because of that blue and orange, and also because of your face.